I'm Bridget A. from Drunk Dog Creative, and I'm going to teach you today how to make this very simple and quick furry cowl. Of course, it's synthetic fur, it's polyester, but it stretches a lot and it sits nicely around your neck and feels like a hug from a teddy bear all day. I've been making a lot of these for my equestrian friends, because, well, I also ride, because they're quite safe. There's no tails to get hung up on anything if you come off your horse, and because it hugs close, it's unlikely to get caught on a saddle horn or stirrups or anything like that. But even if you're not a rider, this is an amazingly comfortable, comforting, great cowl. Takes under an hour to make. It is so easy. So you need some kind of fake fur yarn. I am using Teddy Soft yarn by Maker, which I get at Lincraft in Australia. Spotlight also carries a very similar one. They come in a range of colors. There's about 60 meters to the ball. You can wash this below 30 degrees. You can also tumble dry at a low temperature. So it is washable. You also need a yarn needle and a hook. Now I use a 10 millimeter hook, even though the yarn label calls for 15, because that's what keeps the stitch nice and close. You're not going to believe how easy it is. So now let me show you. I'm going to do any sort of slip stitch to get the yarn onto my hook. However you do yours, you do you. I am going to chain 11. All right, so it's very simple. I didn't go slowly because I assume most people know how to chain. So you just chain 11. Now, the thing with this yarn is it's almost impossible to see where your stitches are. So the only tricky thing is you have to crochet by feel rather than by sight. But you chain 11 and you can feel where the hook is. Then you go to the next stitch, which you can feel the gap. You're going to single crochet into the second chain from the hook, and then single crochet all the way across. So you have 10 single crochets. So that was 1, 2, and then you just kind of feel for the next one. Even though it's only 10 stitches, you do need to kind of count, because it is easy to miss a stitch or do 2 in the same stitch, in which case the project will go wonky and not straight. So that's just 10 single crochets across. And just feel for the gap in each stitch. So great one to do while watching TV, because you go by feel and not by sight. But it is important to keep count. Once you've finished a row, it's almost impossible to count your stitches then, because as you see, the fur masks the stitch definition. And unless you do it by feel, it's hard to count. So I did a single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and then 9 more single crochets to give me 10 stitches. And guess what? That's it. Chain 1 to turn, feel for the first stitch. Chain 1 does not count as a stitch. Single crochet in the first one, single crochet in the next 9, all the way across. And that is all you do. You do rows of 10 single crochets with a turning chain at each row until it's the length you want. Now for this yarn, I basically don't count the rows. I keep going till I'm almost at the end but still have enough yarn to sew up the edges to create the shape. But what you do want to do is end it on a row where, as you put it down, the tail that you're going to sew with, whatever's left, is in the top left, because you're going to turn the right down, the left down, and then you're going to sew along here and along here. And putting the tail in that position allows you to do one sew instead of having to sew one and then the other. So I'll explain that when we get to the end. But you basically just keep going, 10 single crochets and a turning chain until you're almost at the end of the ball or you've achieved the length you want. The only thing to explain is that if you go to fold it and you think you need more length because this looks too small, keep in mind that this really stretches out. And I'll demonstrate that a couple times. So I just tend to use the whole ball and leave enough of a tail at the end, like a long tail at the end. And I make sure that the row I've stopped on, the tail that I'm going to thread into my yarn needle to sew is at the top left, because then I know I can fold and just sew without having to cut it and move it. And I'll be back in a minute with the completed one to show you the assembly. All right, so you now have your rectangle of yarn that you've done with your single crochet. You've got your tail that you've left after, pulling through, and you've put your tail on a yarn needle to sew. Now, what you're going to do is put this out, and you're going to take the right and just fold it across at an angle like that. Leave that tail there. You're going to take the left and you're going to fold it across so that it makes this sort of V shape. So what you've got is the short edge of this is aligned with that, and the short edge of the top one is aligned along the long edge of that. So it makes this V shape. And I know that this opening the opening looks small, but it's not. It stretches quite a bit with this yarn. Now, if you've ended on the correct side, your tail should now be here so that you can sew there and there in one continuous row. And it's so easy. I'm just going to make sure that those two corners there are aligned. And I'm just going to take this tail and I'm going to go through both layers and just do like a overcast all the way through the stitches. So I'm pulling it through, and then I'm bringing it over and pulling through the next one through both layers, trying not to get the corner caught, which is tricky when you start. I'm just gonna, I don't know what the stitch is called because sewing is really not my thing. I would just call it like an overcast stitch. I don't know. Those of you who also sew, my hat is off to you. I only do it when necessary. You want to make sure that these are even so that you have the two corners together. You just keep going all the way around there. And the fur just blends in so you don't even see it. And you want to go over this final corner twice, just for a bit of extra strength. And I'm going to take this other tail and just make sure it's caught in the stitches too to hold it. So now I'm going up the other side. So you see I've done that side. Now I'm going up this side and I'm making sure this little tail is caught in between them too, at least for some stitches, before I weave the rest of it in. And I'm going to just keep going. And the fur just all blends together beautifully. You can't even see where the stitches are or what you've done. And we'll tuck that one in. Weave that in a little bit later. Okay, and again, a double stitch through the very last corner. I've already done one, that's the second one. And then under what you've just done to kind of knot it. And then you're going to just put the needle through to the back. And you're going to just weave this in however you can along here, about 3 times so that it doesn't come out, because this yarn can come out if too much stress or stretch is put on it because it's so big. So just going to weave that about 3 or 4 times, and then you're going to just trim it off. You straighten it, and that is your cowl. So there you go. You can decorate this with a brooch or with whatever you want, or just leave it plain, but it's a big stretchy cowl that feels a bit like a teddy bear hug all winter long. And again, the reason I make these is because they're safe for equestrians. There's no tails to get caught if you come off your horse or to get hung up on anything. And because it hugs close, I find it really safe for horse riding. But there you go.